136th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as AlexRenew. Members of the board, if you take a look at the agenda and make a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Secretary, are there any members of the public online or in the room? Let's jump right into the consent agenda. Minutes from the meeting on December 16th. A motion to approve the minutes as they appear. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, a couple of administrative things. Board calendar. Mr. Carl, any discussion on board calendar?
Not announced yet, but the Eisenhower Partnership is going to be hosting the city manager breakfast here in this room on March 18th. Notifying the board because that was one of the items on the outreach policy that we discussed. If there's any interest, just coordinate with myself and Ms. Huff and we'll get you signed up. Typically, it's a budget.
And at times it also deals with what the development kind of calendar and what's going on in the city on that front.
So the green folder has the updated calendar. In addition, in the green folder, we also updated the monthly report, which will have a more detailed look at the many bills that dropped since the General Assembly session started on Wednesday. Ms. Waters will walk through that later now. Computer.
Facility Management Conference, any updates on this?
Staff will be presenting a presentation on our approach for job order contracting. We tried at a last ditch effort to get a presentation on the approach to the base charge. That didn't happen, but we will be getting a webcast later on, which we'll share with the board in case there's an interest to attend that.
You'd like to? Finance and Audit Committee, something coming up in March.
We will have a draft budget and capital improvement program by then to get our first preview of what's forthcoming for fiscal 27.
Great. And the board retreat coming up in February 20th and 21st. We're all set for that.
Ms. Huff, we have one administrative item from the board, right, with the financial disclosure statement.
Financial disclosure statements were sent out early this month, and they're due to the clerk of the council by February 2nd.
And I would encourage everyone to get their disclosure statement in on time. Speaking as somebody who did not do that once.
Speaking as the person who got the audit exception reports when that didn't happen. It is important.
I was off by one day and had to pay quite a penalty.
I'm good.
They are very easy to do, however.
Yeah.
Extremely easy.
You don't have to disclose anything, hardly. It used to be lots of stuff.
Very
It's
easy.
not very much at all.
Let's jump right into some unfinished business from our last meeting. Revision to the payment assistance policy on tab 3.
Yeah, just, I think one loose end since our last meeting in December, we have a little work to do to expand the payment assistance policy to make sure we can get multifamily customers. We ran a bunch of different analysis over the holidays. Thank you to the board members for working with staff and getting this where it stands tonight. Mr. Roberts is going to walk through the scenarios that we ran as well as the overall changes in policy. Our intent with the hope to get this approved this evening so we can move it forward as part of our outreach program for the base charge change, which has started. You'll see bill stuffers. I sent you all a copy of the bill stuffer that will go out in February. And Mr. Hill also has that same bill stuffer on the back of the Alexandria Federation of Civic Associations flyer, which I'm not reading it, but it's coming up pretty short. Next week. Robert?
So as Mr. Carl said, there are two fairly different approaches here, so we just wanted to make sure you all had a chance to weigh in on both. First slide. Okay, so the first slide here, we're looking at this approach would essentially open up lead funds for every multifamily property that has a base charge increase. We're working under the assumption that they would all apply for lead funds in this scenario, just to be cautious. So if you look here, you can see the percent on the left where that base charge increase would be covered with the lead funds. And then you can see here the total FY 2027 LEAP disbursement if all properties with a base charge increase seek assistance. So that's basically if 10% went after the month, or if we give 10% to all of the multifamily, that's the figure. So that kind of gives you an idea. Current LEAP funds that we have now, 183, this went up a little bit since the last report, so just so you all know. And then total LEAP funds available at the end of FY 2027. So this accounts for what we expect to gain over the next 12 months. And then anticipated FY 2027 residential LEAP funds needed. This is based off of what we've distributed over the last 12-month period. And then you end up with what's remaining. So you can kind of get a gist here of where we would end up at these different percentages. So if you go 10% to the multifamily, to every multifamily customer, you basically end up with 118,000 left over. That's only folks that, again, had a base charge increase. 20%, you end up with 35,000. And then you can see when you hit the 30% mark, you end up in the red. So that's where you essentially have to draw the line if you took that approach. So that's providing or opening up assistance for every multifamily. This was not necessarily a recommendation for the policy, which I'll show you in the next option. But are there any questions on this approach before we show anyone? Okay, so this is the recommended approach from us. It's written in the policy, although we're open to any feedback the board has. So this only provides assistance to multifamily properties that provide affordable housing units to folks and also have a base charge increase. So you can kind of see in the bullets here, basically out of 192 properties, 56% see a rate increase, and the total bill increase to that 56 property, to those 56 properties is 97,000. So keeping that in mind, we can then apply what percent we would cover for those folks. You can see at 10%, it would roughly leave you with 192,000. With 30%, you'd be left with 172,000, and then 50%, you're left with 153,000, which is our recommendation. Kind of a safe approach here. Any questions, comments, feedback?
Just a couple of questions more about the execution of the program, not necessarily those.
Sure.
There are two elements of the program that I'd be very interested in how you think they'll be applied. One is sort of the assurance that, you know, the multifamily unit has at least one of the affordable housing.
Sure.
How do we verify?
So the approach that we had discussed was, it was similar when we were distributing CARES Act money, where there's an attestation form that they attest to say that they have this multifamily at that point. That would be the qualifier.
The other thing that we've done is we've worked with the city to get their addresses of property. It doesn't cover everything, but it covers properties with multifamily units. I'm sorry, affordable multifamily properties with affordable units. That's another area that we can spot check as we distribute funds. But really we're looking for the property owner, the customer to verify that. And as we go along, we can spot check it here and there to make sure we're not not being taken advantage of.
They would also have to sign off that those funds will be passed through and not just absorbed by the.
Right, and that's, I think, section C5, right? Eligible customers must verify that they've passed the charges on to tenants and that any savings resulting from LEAP assistance will be passed directly to the eligible units. And they're attesting to that too.
Yes.
Is there any consequence if we find out they didn't pass it on? Like we could recoup it in future bills?
I suppose I don't know legally if we could. A little outside of my wheelhouse.
And I didn't hear the question. I apologize. Will you repeat it?
Could we recoup the funds?
Is there an enforcement mechanism other than saying, well, you shouldn't do it, we're going to stop?
If
Would
they
be
attested to
that
having-
we would bill you if we find out that you haven't, you said, oh, I forgot, or I didn't do it, I didn't understand it that way, then we could recoup. We could, if they didn't pay us back, then we could recoup the funds on a future bill.
Oh, yeah, you could do, logistically, you could do that. If they
Yeah.
said that they accidentally took it.
Logistically, you can, but this policy doesn't.
If the policy doesn't say it, the attestation could put that in there, that if through the verification process, it's determined that they do not have, that meets the definition of affordable unit, that we would have the ability to recoup.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Is there any way to verify that they're crediting it back to the tenants?
That they're passing it on to the tenants, that, I think that's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah.
That one's just, yeah.
Okay. You've got the total bill increase for the 56 properties. Do you have any idea what the average per apartment unit is? What's the average monthly increase?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but we could pull it for it. You don't have it.
It really depended on the property, Mr. Beal, but we can send out those stats. Okay.
Honestly, we could look at, you could pull an average, but even sometimes an average is.
Is this $5? Is it $30? Is it?
We'd have to go into each, we have it by
We have it by percentage.
meter, not by
Not my unit.
unit behind the meter.
My guess is what we're going to see is that apartment owners who have few affordable units out of a larger number of units, maybe they have 3 or 4 out of 50 or 25, they're going to go, I'm not going to bother with this. It's not that much money. I think nonprofit organizations that own affordable housing will be the ones who will apply. But however, they would have to be ones that would be billing this, which is another barrier. I don't think we're going to get, which is a good thing to have this, a good thing to do, but I don't think we're going to get very much uptake on this because, for example, the high rise, you can kind of see over there has like 12 affordable units in it, but it's probably 1 meter, 2 meters at best, and hundreds of units. They're not applied, so then they can figure out the accounting for how much money those 12 units out of their total picture gets. I just don't see them.
I think you're doing.
Is there a way,
But
is there a way for those tenants, be told that there are opportunities out there, basically they can apply by themselves? Or this is an administrative burden that we are adding?
Yeah, and I think where we're starting is a good starting point, and we'll see how enrollment is. And if we get to midpoint of the calendar year and we want to change it to option 1, we can have that discussion as a board. It's easy enough for us to change the policy, and it's we can get the messaging out 6 months in if we're not getting a lot of enrollment.
I think it's a good place
see how we're
to start
Yeah.
and adjust from there.
I agree with you. A good place to start.
I would not expect, as Mr. Jake said, for this to take off and we get a lot. activity, but I think it's a nice program to offer. I think it's a benefit.
Even those nonprofits, a lot of them are going to be, because most of them in the city are relatively new, last 20 years. They're not going to be individually metered. And a lot of them probably are not allocating utilities out individually to their residents either. So I think once you think of, you filter each time, there may not be much at the end of the day. We'll find that out.
We can always adjust.
Any further discussion on option 2? Does the board agree that the 50% row is the level we'd like to start at? Is there a motion?
I would move that the amended citizens policy be adopted with the provision that staff could come up with a language in regards to our statement that we would recoup this if we determined that the benefit we provided was not, didn't accrue to the tenant.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving right along to phase forward, schedule and capital cost update.
So we thought it'd be a good time in advance of us kicking off the budget cycle with the Finance and Audit Committee in March to do a little budget preview. A lot of our, as you all know, a lot of our spending in our budget is related to our capital program. We thought that now would be a good time to do a health check on phase forward costs, showing what those costs are going to be in FY 2027 budget and compare those back to FY 26. It's again, for the board, it's a health check. It's a touch point on phase forward spending. If this is something the board, likes, it's something new, it's 4 project bundle in one. You can do this on an annual basis as part of our budget update before we get into development in March. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Pylong, who will walk through the status of cost of our program.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. Good evening. So quick refresher, phase forward projects here. These are the 4 major capital projects that we have coming up. So biosolids, remember this is the equipment and processes that were reviewed as part of back in November 2024 on the site tour, as well as includes the thermal dryer system. Headworks renewal, this is upgrades and improvements to our screening equipment and our grit removal systems, really impacting primary treatment associated with plant. Process optimization, this is the improvements to the centrate pre-treatment system. Mr. Chan provided an update and a presentation on this back in February of 2025 involving Animox and the red bugs. And then nutrient reduction was the subject of last month's board update on the tertiary project as a whole. So this is the major improvements that were presented by Ms. Watkins. So quick update on overall phase forward schedule on these 4 primary projects. Kind of a reminder of where we've been in terms of design and then where we're going in terms of upcoming milestones in fiscal year 26 and 27. So the schedule we have laid out is fiscal year, not calendar year. So starting with process optimization, this project is well in the middle of construction now, and we're targeting an August 2026 completion. On headworks renewal, design is advancing pretty quickly. We have an amendment coming up in April of 2026 for board review and approval. Following that, construction will kick off, and then we'll be approaching our final amendment in winter of 2027, with construction continuing on towards Q4 of fiscal year 2031. On biosolids diversification, the solids upgrade program, we've had 3 amendments that have been executed to date, with our 4th amendment actually up for board review and approval tonight regarding the thermal dryer pre-construction services. We'll touch base on further detail on that later in this slide deck, as well as in reviewing the memo. And then finally, nutrient reduction. And this is, we're really kicking off this project, design phase of that tonight as well. It's also up for review, for board review and approval with design services to start commencing in the next couple months. So just an overall highlight of the major milestone at project completion, as well as amendments to board review. So as we start to take a look at overall capital costs and where we're at, the slide is just highlighting each of these projects, major touch points and storylines that we wanted to make the video. So for process optimization, this construction is nearing about 30% completion now, and we are on track for overall project completion this summer. Crews and the design team now are coming up with a plan to commission the system as a whole and bring operations and maintenance along. On the headworks removal project, this is the upgrades to the screening, grip removal type equipment. We've been taking a look at the scope over the last year, as well as our project budgets. And then we've been meeting with our operations and maintenance staff through design input sessions. So those are opportunities for staff to tell us what they like about components, what they don't like, how they want the system designed, set up, certain types of equipment or manufacturers that work with them. We take that information back, make sure it's aligned with overall project's scope and project goals, and then ultimately have to come up with recommendations on making sure that the project is only staying strict and specific to project elements that are actually needed. Oftentimes we'll get, requests for nice to haves or wants, but, we've taken a look at the overall budget and scope over the last year and made sure we dial that down to critical needs and critical infrastructure and upgrades that need to be updated. One example of this has to do with the expansion of the core screens. We originally had in the project the expansion of a third core screen channel. We've since taken a look at that and realized that was more of a want from staff and what we could live with, and have kind of eliminated that from the project. We've run on two screens for about 75 years, and so a critical need is to replace the existing two screens, but that third core screen expansion was more of a want. As we review the next amendments coming up in the spring, that's when construction is going to start following on over the summer. As far as biosolids diversification, when the board did their last site tour back in November of 2024 to look at that aging equipment and infrastructure to be improved, the dryer was essentially at a very beginning conceptual phase. We've spent the last several months progressing that design, and then you see here on the bottom right-hand screen is a 3D rendering of the dryer facility actually laid out within Building C. So these are the two dryer facilities laid out there. And so as we're citing this within Building C, we are realizing that the scope of improvements needing to Building C have significantly advanced and upgraded based on what we initially assumed. So before we were assuming just a partial demolition of the building. Based on how this is being laid out and the use of the space, it's going to see a full demolition of that building and reconstruction with the dryer and all ancillary equipment. As far as construction ongoing now, we've executed 3 amendments. That work and construction has been ongoing since the fall of 2025. We do have new heat exchangers going to be online by summer of 2026. That's about a year earlier than originally anticipated. And then we are expecting thermal dryer construction to start in winter 2028. As far as nutrient reduction, that preliminary design is going to be starting over the next early 2026, over the next couple months, with up tonight is the initial contract for review and approval. So the next couple slides that we have laid out are really identifying, kind of a preview for FY 2027. So we've identified on each of these slides the approved 2026 budget and the draft 2027 budget, and then highlighting key contractual milestones along the way. We've also had these color-coded circles indicating board approved, pending any future action, and then board approval via annual budget. As we walk through these slides, you'll notice some projects have more green coded bubbles associated with them. That's sort of lends itself to getting more cost certainty as the project moves forward. And then we'll ultimately take a look at overall program cost certainty. So walking through process optimization costs, this is the project that's about 30% construction complete now. Our draft 2026 budget had about $13 million included. Proposed for FY 2027, around $10 million. The driver for this decrease was the contractor's lower bid than original estimated. However, we are seeing a slight increase for anticipated final design and commissioning scope just to bring the system online and operational. And then we are trending slightly higher from inspection services. So on this project overall, we are seeing a decrease from 13 million to $10 million.
How many bids you have for that? How many bids you have for that?
There was 3 bids.
How close the cost are?
They were, I believe, 7.3 was the lowest. We had, if memory serves me, up to, I think around 9 million, and then I think just shy of 10 million, if I can remember.
This might be important in the next 2 slides to identify in the budget column where the costs are coming from.
So Edworks renewal costs. So in the current FY 2026 budget, just starting at the bottom, around $121 million. Draft proposed for FY 2027 is $127 million. So we have we've already identified a lot more items on the CMART project. We have design services that are reviewed and approved on an annual budget. We are seeing an updated estimate here because we are proposing some further electrical and HVAC upgrades that we needed in each of the buildings. Our resident engineering services and CM services, rough order magnitudes, have been increased slightly based on updates to scope around that additional electrical and HVAC elements. So moving down below the line as we get towards construction services. So we had initial CMAR and equipment procurement approved by the board. So equipment procurement under FY 26 was actually slightly higher than what the actual costs came in. So for Amendment 1 here, those are actual contractor bids that were ultimately executed. Mentioned earlier in the presentation how we were looking at evaluating scope and determining what we actually needed to do. So as part of that process, we did eliminate the need for the expansion of the core screen channel to add a 3rd screen. So what that did was simply eliminate Amendment 2, that early site work and utility relocations. We really were reprioritizing, do we really need to do that work, instead place that money more appropriately into actual improvements that we need to make on the project itself. So the 3rd amendment, which is early equipment installation. We're currently in the stages of finalizing this design and working with the contractor for bids. So that's anticipated to come to the board in April of this year. So there's no change from our initial budget estimate for carrying out. You'll see building A and K. These were originally split up as to 2 different amendments based on our evaluation of scope and what we're needed. We are combining these into one single amendment. Really, it's the most critical equipment that we need to get done. So it's replacement of the core screens, placement of gates and control systems, and then doing additional electrical and HVAC upgrades that are needed in both of those buildings. They're about 20-25 years old. And finally, the last item was the primary rear observation house. This was a lot of work that can be reprioritized and performed with the job order contract. This is not critical equipment or any infrastructure that would need to be replaced as part of this project.
Can you help me understand why the resident engineer is not part of the construction management team?
Because they're different entities, so we split up. The resident engineer on the project is going to be supplied by the engineer. So the design engineer is most familiar with the project. They're also going to be the resident engineer on the project. And then this construction management is a separate team together. So they're different contracts. That's why we split them up.
The CM is a phase forward. Overall, look at the CM as the overall phase forward program manager, construction manager. And then we're using the AE firms as the designers as the individual REs. That's how we set the program up. And Ms. Glapion presented an org chart a few months ago, kind of walking through that detail. I think the other thing to mention is that these costs that are shown in the, now we're 2 years into this, the budget numbers shown in that column are directly from the contractor. So these aren't engineer estimates. We're not guessing.
These are
They're actual contractor estimates. That's the beauty of using CMR and Progressive, is we're monitoring this budget all along the job and can reprioritize our funds and scope where necessary. So this is I think one of the advantages that we're seeing right now so far on CMAR is we're able to manage and monitor that budget real time.
That's the contract,
That's the contractor's estimate.
that's the GMP you agreed to?
Sorry.
The GMP you
We're not
agreed
at GMP yet, but it would add up to 127. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We have to execute 73. We have 19.7, then once we execute 73.9, that'll be the GMP. So these early amendments are just early work packages, early amendments.
Okay.
But we've gotten our capital improvement program process down to make sure that aligns with timing of contractor estimates, which are then reviewed by the engineer, coordinated with staff.
Okay.
That's going to be the same for biosolids. Obviously, the tertiary job doesn't have an estimate by the contractor just yet, so that's still engineer estimate.
Moving on, biosolids diversification costs. So FY 2026 budget, 315 million. Just to give it away, draft FY 27 budget was 355. Again, the driver for this was the building C modifications that are needed in order to accommodate the new dryer facility. So that's demolition of the building down to the base slab, installing 2 new dryers, and then constructing a second floor that houses the electrical and HVAC equipment and all the other ancillary components associated with that. You will notice the circles on the left. We do have a lot more green circles associated with this project. So the more green you have, the more cost certainty we are getting with those initial amendments. Couple other things to point out. We are from RE and construction management services. We were trending higher for inspection services to accommodate the improvements and upgrades to building C. However, we have lowered our estimates for construction management services due to efficiencies for managing multiple projects with the same team. The initial CMAR and amendments through amendments 1 through 3 are, Mr. Carl said, based on these are actual amendments that were used for the FY 27 budget compared with the initial estimates in FY 26. Up for review tonight and review is the pre-construction services for medium-term upgrades. So that's the memo in the board packet tonight. That is to approve PC construction to provide the same services that they did for the short-term improvements, centrifuges, gravity thickeners, things like that, but instead for the new thermal dryer facility to help support the design on that. And then the last item, the medium-term upgrades for the thermal dryer. This we're currently showing as one amendment, which may ultimately be broken out into a couple different ones just to phase the work appropriately. We're originally carrying around 212.6 million. We increased that to 248, really to account for the scope changes to construct building C based on that full demolition and reconstruction. That number is based on coordination with
So the GMP on that job that we hope to get to is 355.
correct.
35. Fine.
Nutrient reduction costs, we were under FY 26, frequently carrying 182 million, increase for likely up proposed FY 27 to 190. We've approved owner's advisor services on this. Our EMCs, our resident engineer CM services is no change from FY 26 to 27. And we are in the infancy of this project as it relates to design and overall cost certainty. We just went to the board last month to do an update on where this project stands. And then for tonight, it is review and approval of the preliminary design of that project. Our original FY 26 budget for these various components that you see listed here were an overall lump sum estimate. As we've learned more about this project, what we think we're going to go and where we could possibly go, we've further refined this scope and overall further refined these cost estimates. But this is still pretty early on in the project, but our draft number for this is 190 million for final GM. So next slide's just showing overall, phase forward capital spending across the next 5 fiscal years. Just to give you a general sense and trend of how each project is spending. It follows typical S curve, with our major spending years really being between FY 29 and FY 2030-31, and then ultimately tapering off as the projects complete towards the end of FY 2032. So this slide is really showing our overall capital cost evolution. You've seen this slide on a project level basis before. This is now focused on program-wide as a whole. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side axis is your cost variability. And we have in red is your upper range of probable cost, and then the bottom is your lower range of your probable cost. And then a series of vertical lines here that are demonstrating, different design completion milestones. So the cost certainty is tied to when your design is complete, which ultimately leads to an executed amendment. As your design progresses across various projects and amendments get executed, your cost certainty becomes more defined as you go. So, for example, at the start of FY 2025, what we've executed at that point was really just the contract for process optimization. That's the project that's about 30% construction complete now. At that time, overall phase 4 costs could have ranged upwards of 90% on the high end, down to around 50% on the lower range of probable costs. So it could have been higher than 90% estimate or come in 50% lower. As we move forward through FY 2026, we've executed a whole host of amendments for the solids upgrade for short-term project. Our cost certainty band is starting to come down. Our PPSU design is starting to finalize and amendments get executed. So as we make our way through FY 2026 to FY 2027, overall programmatic cost certainty is going to improve. And ultimately, with execution of the biosolids dryer amendment, FY 2028, that band continues to narrow and narrow as our designs are completed and that various amendments get executed.
One thing to note here that's a little different than a lump sum job. So AlexRenew is a lump sum job, 454, right? That's out. All of these jobs, our intent is not to do them lump sum. With the GMP, our intent is to keep them being time and materials. So you're paying for what you're actually incurring as the job moves forward. With the idea, when we get to completion, having shared savings set up with the CMAR or the Progressive Design Builder, where the owner retains a certain percent of the shared savings. Some of the shared savings then would go back to the CMAR Progressive Design Builder. But right now, our intent as staff is not to convert these to lump sum. So that's why you still see some uncertainty.
So that money is captured in the contingencies, owner's contingency. Saying that at the end, if the money is not spent, that the intention is to share it with the CMAR.
Savings, correct. Like if the TNM is less than what the GMP was, that saving gets shared between the owner and
And it is captured in the contingency, owner's
Contingency comes
contingency,
back to us.
100% contingency, okay.
Good. If we could leave this chart up for a while. Let me boil it down and see if I got it. When we prepared the CIP for the 26 budget, phase forward weighed in at 631 million, give or take.
It's like that, 50 million,
Now it's, yeah, exactly,
82.
682. So that's an 8% increase. Again, within the bands of that diagram, right? In fact, just half the height of that. What does this do to our rate projections? We feed this into the rate model when we set rates in the coming year?
Yes, the last couple rate projections had the 682 on there.
Oh, they
Not
do,
much, Not much.
because of the way we finance this over so many years and so forth.
Spread out over such a long period of time. And a big impact.
It's as big as AlexRenew. Necessary, we have to do it. It's not gonna get any cheaper, but it's as big as AlexRenew.
Can you go back a couple slides to your capital spending per fiscal year?
The bar.
Yeah, the bar graph. That one. So in fiscal year, and you always see this in CIP spending, in fiscal year 30, it's the most expensive year for your headworks renewal, biosolids, and nutrient reduction are all occurring in that same year of fiscal year 30. CIP is over 150 million. I know you're trying to do a lot of work in a small amount of time. Is there any advantage to trying to spread that curve out, or not having everything in construction at the most expensive point in fiscal year 30, where we could spread that out to 31, 32, where the timing of this is all intertwined together, that would be hard to do?
Yes, that I want to get this work done as quickly as we possibly can across all of them, specifically biosolids and headworks. You know, that we're replacing and upgrading critical equipment along all of our treatment process and the nutrient reduction project. It's always possible to spread something out, but we do run the risk of not having our equipment upgraded and improved and being able to treat the water.
Mr. Berg, I think biosolids, no, headworks, no, but I think nutrient reduction is where we have the most ability to look and see what we actually want to build. That's a very conservative estimate right now. Ms. Glapion presented last month. I think nutrient reduction assumes that we're going to build 6 new D-night filters. That's the worst case scenario. We're hoping that we can do modeling that shows that we don't have to build that full suite of filters. And that's something we could look at kicking off and pushing down the road potentially.
Your permit doesn't tell you how many, the minimum number of filters that you need to run.
Permit doesn't actually, well, this is tied to the expansion. So it's to get us to drive TN down.
Okay.
So our permit would tie back to a load allocation. So whatever way we come up with to getting the TN reduction, to get our concentrations to meet the load allocation would be the driver. And hopefully that's optimizing the system a bit more and building less infrastructure. That's our, that's what we want to study over this next year that Ms. Glacker's going to present this evening. I think there's where you're going to probably hopefully see a chunk come down or get pushed over.
I think Justin, Mr. Carl, we've talked about this previously. I think for Fairfax County, we're seeing this by all of our treatment by contract. We're seeing that with our friends at DC Water and now in AlexRenew and ourselves. So the more that we could spread that out, we're just having that challenge over and over again. So just wanted to throw that idea out.
Major takeaways, overall estimates to align with FY 2026, except for the biosolid project. And we've got a 13% increase what we were originally projecting, primarily due to the significant upgrade needed to reconstruct NBC. Process optimization is still ongoing. There's no issues with construction moving forward. That's going to be wrapped up in FY 2026 or August of 2026. Overall, our project team is pretty in tune with both the designers and the contractors, just to making sure that we are aligning scope with what we actually need and making sure also and budget.
Any further questions? This was excellent, provided great context for what comes up next. Thanks.
Yeah, you're good.
We still have some new items of business to get to. Nutrient reduction project contract amendment number 1. Mr. Carl.
Ms. Blevins? Good evening. So going to tab 5 in your packet, there's a memo. Ms. Blackham presented on this last month. As Mr. Pylan just presented, this is the first phase that includes the design of the nutrient reduction project. A big effort here is part contractor, part designer. This is a progressive design build job. So we will be doing a significant modeling of our wastewater plant. So really trying to set the stage for what we're going to build in later phases of the job, while we get the design done on the tertiary system, which we know what we need now, get that upgraded while we finalize the scope of what's next for the 4MGD expansion. So we had do you remember, almost, what was it, 2 years ago, we authorized progressive design build for this job. And we had advanced this procurement, RQ, RP. We had 3 shortlisted design build teams. And what we're recommending to bring to the board tonight is a execution of contract with Proposing Industrial, who is the successful respondent in response to the RFQ and RFP, to execute preliminary design services in the amount of $4.4 million, which includes CO's delegated.
Any discussion on this? The memo is very clear.
Pretty clear. The only comment I have, you guys are tough on scoring. These are really great.
74 is the gentleman's C.
No, 5. So 5. I think it's important to understand how we score. 1 through 10 is how we score everything. 5 meets expectations. So 5 is a C. So when you look at 70 points, it's, you're well above C. You're adding value. Anything above a 5 adds value. 25% value added on the score. 50 just meets expectations.
Wow. This is fairly great.
Great information here.
This is the tough side of the river.
That's what I thought.
Right, I think we explained that to the teams though, going in, we get questions during and how we actually score, but to normalize it and not have crazy swings, it's like middle of the road, you're answering, you're providing everything that we have. You're gonna focus on adding value to AlexRenew.
Any discussion? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Moving right along, another contract for approval. Biosolids diversification project amendment number 4. That's 6. Carl?
Yeah, so similar to the last memo that we just went through. This is for PC Construction, our CMAR for the Biosolids project. As Mr. Pylan just presented, we previously executed a pre-construction services agreement amendment with PC Construction for the short-term improvements. This amendment is for the thermal dryer. As Mr. Pylan presented, the cost was $2.1 million. It's been that for the past year, with CO's delegated authority. The amendment for the contract would be a not to exceed of 2.551846. And yeah, I don't know if there's any more detail we need to go into here, other than the point of this is to provide constructability reviews, cost estimates, assisting AlexRenew with their budget as we progress the thermal dryer. That will be an interface with both the designer, our staff, as well as the potential provider of that dryer, which we'll have to go out to for going through that process now.
Discussion? Is there a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Now, we've all been waiting for some very important presentation on PFAS sampling and thermal technologies.
So I just maybe want to introduce Mr. Winchell first. Introduce yourself to staff. No.
My name is Lloyd Winfield from John Caldwell. I reside near St. Paul, Minnesota. Talking last night, my background has always been in wastewater, and over the years it has progressively gotten more in focus around thermal processes in our industry. It's typically incinerators, but as well. In the last 5 years, I've been a lot of that. And that's what connected us on this project we're going to talk about and touch on here. So glad to answer any questions at any time when I'm speaking. But now this Dave here is going to kick it off for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
So really quick, timing on this was purposeful. We knew that there'd be many bills introduced at this year's General Assembly session. At the same time, we've been collecting data at our plant within the collection system and advancing our own internal studies looking at thermal technologies as a solution for destroying PFAS. So this presentation is going to tie up with the discussion that we'll have as well when Ms. Waters gives the update on the General Assembly report. But I think this is context to understand the bills that are being introduced at the state level right now and the national level, and really give the board a feel for where we're at and where our risk is with respect to the data presented tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Carl, and thank you, board, for having us. I was remarking to Mr. Hill that the last time we updated you was September 2024. It doesn't seem that long ago, but a lot has happened since then. So as just a brief reminder, we're going to be talking about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances tonight, PFAS. PFAS are human-made. There are very few naturally occurring PFAS, extraordinarily rare. They don't break down naturally in the environment. That carbon-fluorine bond is the strongest in chemistry. They're widely used in commercial, industrial, in our day-to-day lives. More than 5,000 PFAS compounds are used daily, and they can have negative human health impacts. We're going to be focusing on PFOA and PFOS tonight because those are the ones where the science is most evolved on the health impacts and where we're seeing a lot of movement on the regulatory side. When we talk about PFAS, another thing that makes them very different from compounds that we've been regulated for before is that we're talking about extraordinarily small concentrations, parts per billion and parts per trillion. To give you an idea, we talk about that as maybe 1/100th of a teaspoon in a normal swimming pool and a parts per billion, and 1/100,000th of a teaspoon in a swimming pool for parts per trillion. And as I mentioned, they're used in our everyday life. The fact that they don't break down easily means that they're very useful for a number of different applications, from firefighting foams that put out very hot fires to water repellent clothing, stain resistant paint, non-stick cookware,
food packaging, cosmetics, slippery things, oil resistant or grease resistant things, or very high heat applications is where PFAS really shine. Kind of zooming in on this, how we use them and the kinds of concentrations that we're exposed to in our daily life. Thank you to DC Water for this wonderful graphic. DC Water's been doing a lot of good work on this. When you compare PFAS concentrations in parts per billion in biosolids or our US blood serum, the CDC has mentioned has been monitoring PFAS in human blood for a while. You see very low concentrations when you compare it to other things that we're exposed to, like national averages of food packaging. So we're looking at maybe 876,000, 100,000 parts per billion compared to 134. It really shows that there are a lot of different ways that we can be exposed to PFAS. Yeah.
What is Bloom?
Bloom is DC Water's biosolid product.
Okay.
Yep. That they market and
Sell.
Mr. Robertson went home and threw away all his ketchup when he saw the ketchup number on. I mean, it's interesting when you think about the slide too, is you can just add three zeros to the right of everything in your parts per thousand. When you go through and start thinking about how PFAS gets in your wastewater, and we start thinking about us, the theme of today's presentation is, we're a residential community. You can see how it easily gets into the concentration of wastewater in parts per thousand, because again, those are in parts per billion. So add 3 zeros to the right when comparing it to influent concentrations in wastewater.
And these are the things that we commonly use. So to Mr. Carl's point, PFAS is around us and we're going to see it when we sample in wastewater, regardless of whether you're industrial contributors. Kind of building on that, we talked about this slide the last time we spoke. Once PFAS is in the water cycle, it's going to stay in the water cycle unless you can disrupt it. So really starting here at the industry, you start with industries that make PFAS or make products that contain PFAS. Those come to our community as products. Industrial waste can go to a landfill that contains PFAS. You can have PFAS emissions in the smoke that's coming out of your stacks. And you can have industrial wastewater that either is permitted to go directly to your surface waters, or it comes to the wastewater treatment plant through your pretreatment program. Then from that industry, you can have air deposition on farms, which can get into the water cycle that way or your food cycle that way. And then that runoff from the farm could contain PFAS and get into your source water, into your surface water. And irrigation from your surface water that contains PFAS can contribute to PFAS concentrations on your farm. From your community, that your drinking water provider, through their intake, is taking PFAS from the surface water, is taking surface water that can contain PFAS, which comes to the community through drinking water. And then from your community, from the sewage that comes to us. So all of that contains PFAS and comes down to the wastewater treatment plant. And then finally, if we look at the landfill side, landfills can get sludge or industrial waste that contain PFAS. And then that leachate from that landfill can come back to wastewater treatment plants. We are at the end of the pipe, quite literally. And so we are a place that receives PFAS contributions from all of these sources and can potentially be a place where we can disrupt that cycle. So AlexRenew has been thinking about it. Since September 2024, we've been refining our approach. And starting at the top right, the basis of our approach is really a strong monitoring program. We talked about that in a couple of years ago. We had just started sampling and we continued quarterly sampling since then. So we have about 1.5 years of data that we can start to look at and draw conclusions from. We also looked at what we use in our treatment process, any of the equipment or materials that we use in the treatment process to see if we're inadvertently adding PFAS into our system. We've been also partnering. So tonight we're going to talk about a partnership that we have around research from Caldwell and the partnering that we're doing around our regional study to see if we can find shared approaches. Because when we think about disrupting PFAS at our level, it's going to be expensive. And then Ms. Waters is going to talk about some of the things that we've been doing on a statewide level to start to inform policy and help inform policymakers around monitoring approaches that would make sense for the industry. Mr. Pylon spoke earlier about the investment that we have in our biosolids diversification project. We're looking to see how we can leverage that to set us up for potential future regulations so that we can be more adaptable and nimble should regulations around PFAS and biosolids come out. And then finally, I'll present tonight on work that we've done in our sewer shed on sampling to identify any sources and where we could potentially do some work on source minimization. A reminder about the test methods for PFAS. The EPA has approved a test method 1633A now that they modified. And that test method is only approved for 40 PFAS compounds out of 5,000. So this can cause complications as you're trying to understand where PFAS are coming from or how they might transform through your treatment process. And so we only have really a small lens in the world of all the PFAS that are cycling through our environment. And as we presented last time, PFAS are tricky. They can transform through, research has shown that they can transform through biological processes like wastewater treatment. So you can get measuring PFAS in your influent and not see all of the precursor compounds that are coming in. Those precursor compounds can then be transformed through biological processes in the treatment process into compounds that you can see. And so oftentimes through wastewater treatment, you may see what it look like increases between influent into your effluent and biosolids. That really is a result of the small amount of compounds that you can see and the enormous family of compounds that you can't detect coming in and how those are transformed through. Any questions there? So getting into the sampling that we've done since we last spoke. We've done significant sampling in our collection system and kind of starting at AlexRenew. We've been sampling, you'll see sampling results from quarterly monitoring program of our influent and biosolids. We then expanded to the 5 main interceptors to understand if there's sections of our sewer shed that we may be seeing higher contributions of PFAS. And then we sampled our industrial users, our 3 industrial users, Innova, Reworld, and Alsco, to understand if they might be contributing PFAS into our system. We're planning to repeat this testing next year and are working closely with Fairfax's pretreatment program to sample the significant industrial users in Fairfax County that contribute to our solution. So starting with our influent and effluent concentrations, we're focusing on PFOA and PFOS because those are the 2 compounds of regulatory concern, and comparing against national ranges. The national ranges that we have are pretty broad. They include folks that are more residential like us, and also other treatment plants that might have significant industrial users who are PFAS manufacturers, significant users of PFAS in their system. However, when you compare our influent, what's coming into the plant, and our effluent, what's coming out of the plant for PFOA and PFOS, we're consistently at the lower end of these national ranges. When we then expand that to look at the top three, our PFOA and PFOS concentrations from our significant industrial users from one grab sample, and the major interceptors, Potomac Interceptor, Potomac Yard, Commonwealth, Holmes Run, Jones Point. What we see, and you compare that to AlexRenew's influent, there's no significant smoking gun. There's no place where we can say, hey, we think that's where PFOA and PFOS are coming from. There's really not a significant difference between the concentration we get when we sample in the interceptors and what we see coming into AlexRenew.
Maybe another way to look at this slide too, Potomac Interceptor, can you go back to that?
Yeah.
There we go. So if you go back, Potomac Interceptor, you know, it's right next to the combined sewer area of completely residential. So you can start drawing trends when you start looking at the data with respect to the interceptors themselves. So Potomac served primarily residential. A lot of you all live in Rosemont and Delray, that's Commonwealth Interceptor. That's all residential. And then you've got Potomac Yard trunk sewer, that's all residential. Our industrial users are all tying into one pipe, including flows from Fairfax, and that's the Holmes Run.
Yep.
So when we start looking at data between just the pipes and where it's coming from in the community, we didn't see a differentiation there either with respect to concentrations. Like, you know, one could say that all your industrial users tie into Holmes Run, that's going to be a peak, that's going to be a spike. We're not seeing that data, and we're not seeing the data coming out of the sewers at the locations of these users either. So in short, we're primarily residential municipal background concentrations of PFAS. We're not Michigan, we're not other areas, San Francisco, where you've got big users of industry that are tying into the system where you can do source reduction to get rid of PFAS in the system.
So is the Potomac Yard Interceptor PFOA, the fact that it's the highest by far the other interceptors, that is not so significantly high that of any, doesn't mean anything?
Concentration wise?
Yeah.
Mr. Jinks, no, and it's one sample, and really statistically, it's not. The bar looks higher, but it's not significantly higher.
So the sampling was one once, okay, so
Yep.
statistically, and it's good information to have, but statistically, it's not valid.
Hard to calculate variance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are looking to repeat the, the sample.
Don't forget, it aligns with our, you know, the influent. We've been sampling the influent now for 18 months, and it hasn't, we're not seeing jumps around that either. That's quarterly sampling of influent. So it aligns well with that influent effluent concentration we've seen.
Any more questions here, but before I move on?
Give an example of a industrial concentration so the board can kind of understand where that would fall in that part of control.
Oh. Well,
That's building.
biosolids.
That's-
These are biosolids. I like.
Yeah.
This is an industrial, like 250 parts per million. It would be an industrially impacted. Even higher, you see concentrations that can be much higher than that. Places that are so industrially impacted have been working really hard over the last couple of years to permit and reduce concentrations from their significant industrial users. So we're seeing those numbers come down over time as well.
Question, does more often now new residential constructions using plastic pipe to distribute, receive and distribute water with a house? PCV pipe include these plastics or not?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Not that
No.
Like CPVC?
Yeah.
Like CPVC, like PEX?
I can look into that more for things, but, not yet. A lot of other things to do. Now pivoting to biosolids, we've chosen another comparable to compare our biosolid sampling, our quarterly biosolid sampling to. Along the bottom, you will see each of our quarterly sampling events since September 2024. This is compared to what's called a regulatory tiered approach that was pioneered in Michigan. These tiers, so the first tier goes up to 20 parts per billion, the second tier goes up to 50 parts per billion, and the third tier goes up to 100 parts per billion. As you go up in concentrations, then the land application of biosolids becomes more restricted. And those concentration numbers were based on sampling that Michigan did early in 2017 and 2018 to develop not a human health risk number, but a number that's statistically based on how their sampling curve came out. And they took the top tier at 100 parts per billion and said above that, we're classifying those wastewater treatment plants as industrially impacted, and we won't allow them to land apply biosolids. What we're seeing across the nation is that other states are adopting this tiered approach and adopting those concentration limits without doing the sampling first. And it's becoming an approach that is more and more accepted nationally. So Maryland has adopted a similar approach to this, and other states in the nation are looking at a similar tiered approach. So I think that's really important to understand how this is developed and also how this has been spreading.
It's important to note, you're setting a tiered approach based on Michigan data,
Yes.
not based on data in Virginia or Maryland, Michigan.
And it isn't based on.
The Maryland approach went through.
Exactly the same as that.
Did it go through?
It's,
They're at 20.
they're at 20. Yeah, it's regulatory guidance now, but
See,
What are some of the restrictions in the tiered approach?
So below 20, there's typically no restrictions. At between 20 and 50, you would reduce your land application rate sometimes by 75% or 50%. Then land application would be significantly reduced between 50 and 100%. People below 50, land application below 50% of what you currently would do. And then above 100, you would not be able to land apply your biosolids and would have to landfill them or find it in. Typically, you would have to landfill them.
But in Maryland, they come up with a number which is so ridiculous. That means just each is just prohibited. So
we have it up there, Dr. Juan, for that reason. We showed PFO, we showed PFAS. The Maryland legislation is a sum of PFO plus PFAS, and their number that they're proposing in their legislative cycle is 20. The last we heard, and it's a sum of PFOA plus PFAS. That's why you have that dark blue line there that Ms. Dines is showing, and we're showing that we're above 20 in June and September on the total. There has been talk that Maryland and Virginia should be equal.
How is when we're figuring out what can be applied? What's the measurement frequency? Is it, you have to do it monthly? Is it at the site when somebody gets there? How does it work?
Ms. Waters will kind of walk through the range of bills. Right now in Virginia, we don't have any restriction, but the testing that we've seen in Maryland as well as Michigan is at the wastewater plant. And it's the rolling average on a quarter basis at your plant. There's what, we'll get into it, but there's a wide different range of bills proposed for Virginia right now. I think there's 12.
Now it's about 8.
But this is at the plant. That's how it's set up quarterly. So directly applicable to what we can do. So we'd be on the very edge of being restricted from, I guess the point here is if Michigan or Maryland's PFOA plus PFAS legislation were applied in Virginia, we would be at the edge of not being able to land apply biosolids. Same goes for you too, probably. Mr. Barrett.
So the values across, I mean, they're fairly consistent, but there is some variability. Any theories on why we're seeing the numbers kind of jump from 14, 15 to 25, 30? Are you doing the sampling on the same days of the month or?
We don't know. And so that's why I think one of the things that I think is really important is that is taking a rolling average, because a lot could contribute to this variation. And I think that's one of the reasons why we want to continue doing sampling out in the collection system, and why we'll continue doing the sampling. I'm not sure, this.
Can you go back to slide 3?
No, I.
Mr. Barrett, we're measuring this in parts per, we're looking at this number and thinking it's like this big whole number. It's 20 parts per billion.
Yeah.
So somebody might have used, I don't know,
They could have used
different
the
deodorant
wrong-
that morning. Or
the wrong
smeared a bunch of lipstick on their face. I don't know. But I mean, given that we are primarily residential, we're measuring these concentrations in such small amounts that they're not really that big.
But it's
variation.
probably 1,000 paper cuts that are getting you. It's not probably
Yes.
one person, it's 1,000 or thousands of people that are doing it. So when I was looking at those numbers, to me, is there how wet or how dry the period was? Can you compare that to the flow that you're seeing at the plant? Is there some correlation? Just, is it a drier period? Would you see more of this concentration? So it's less dilution?
We could, and these are biosolids. It could be just that it's hotter. We're seeing more transformation of precursors. I think it's, at this point, we don't have enough data to kind of speculate, to draw correlations. But again, as Mr. Carl mentioned, in such small concentrations, and to your point, Mr. Barrick, there are very small changes in either what's happening in the collection system or what's happening at the plant that could cause variability. And it might be hard to pinpoint what those are, particularly since we're primarily residential.
Yeah, these look like huge increases. And you look at your slide 3,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Parts per billion.
you can't tell the difference.
No,
Correct.
it's somebody sneezed that day. It really is. I mean, it looks like big variability when we're talking about parts per billion, and when we present it like this, but I think there are a number of things that you can speculate, but
And each month is one sample.
each month is one sample.
So that could be instrument error.
It could be instrument error. We see that even the analytical methods and the method detection limits for each of the labs changes. So it could be.
And to do more testing, more sampling on the same day, so then in effect you average, you throw out the top, the highest 10 and the lowest 10 figure as their aberrations, and average. I mean, there are methods to kind of, when you have this kind of thing in statistics, kind of get to a number that is more likely to be true.
I think that's why it's sampling and consistent sampling is just really critical because you have these fluctuations that look big and will put you into another regulatory tier that will cost you serious money. But may just be an artifact of how you sampled or what the analytical method, how it was applied that day. So. But definitely when we look at the way state regulations are progressing, we do feel like there is some risk here in our biosolids and how we do see some variation in those concentrations that push us into a different tier, more so than what we're seeing in our influent or effluent. The data is constantly evolving. I think one of the things that has been difficult about this is that it's been hard to find comparable data sets. And I think we're seeing that more and more. Last week, North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality published their preliminary study, and it looked at data sets from across the country, some data sets that we hadn't seen yet. So we included it here for you tonight. When we look at particularly our PFOS concentration and compare it against Georgia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Michigan, then you can see the work that Michigan has done kind of when they initially did sampling, which is this lower bar, and after they've gone through their source reduction program. Michigan is a state with a lot of industrial users who like metal finishers and platers who use PFAS daily. Consistently though, AlexRenew's PFOS concentrations fall in the lower quartile compared to the others. We're at the very low ranges compared to other national and state data sets. This slide is also very interesting. So when we talked before about how states are adopting those tiered levels based on sampling that was done in Michigan in 2017, 2018, and a while ago, we now have a data set in North Carolina to compare that to. And what's really interesting about this data set is two things. One, we can see that, when we look at Michigan's pre-source reduction, their ranges are from very close to zero to like 2,300 parts per billion. When we look at North Carolina's data, we're seeing much lower, much smaller ranges and much lower concentrations in their biosolids, which points to a need for states to do their own sampling before they just adopt tiers. Another thing that's really interesting about Michigan compared to North Carolina is that Michigan is a very industrial state. North Carolina a little less so. And North Carolina is trying to answer this question of, are there differences in PFOA and PFOS concentrations based on the character of the wastewater that a wastewater treatment plant is receiving? So you can see here that they've broken up their data set into three big main groups. One are wastewater treatment plants that receive domestic wastewater only. The second permit category are wastewater treatment plants that receive industrial wastewater primarily. And then the third category receive a combination of industrial and commercial and residential sources. And the really interesting thing, particularly if you look at PFOA, is that it's a small data set, that you're not seeing significant differences in the average PFOA concentration between these three sources. what we've talked about for a long time is that industrial contributors are contributing PFOA or PFOS to your system. However, this data is actually pointing to the fact that there may be some industrial users who might be more likely manufacturers or heavy users of PFAS that are at this top range. You can also see them in this municipal side, but that a lot of the wastewater treatment plants who aren't getting those types of industrial users who use a lot of PFAS are around pretty residential levels. And so if you were with North Carolina, if they were to address those industrial users, you would likely come, those concentrations, those median concentrations would likely be around what we would typically think of as background levels of PFOA and PFOS.
Sound like you're saying we should not be having federal regulations.
Or Dr. Wong, we should stop using PFAS in our daily life.
Each state should adopt their own.
I think the cart has gotten a little bit before the horse, and states are taking quicker action than the federal government, and they're using a very different regulatory approach to do so, which isn't based on human health criteria to regulate biosolids. It's not based on epidemiological studies that show impacts to human populations. It's based on a statistical approach that is meant to address outliers first and then continue to ramp down as you've addressed those outliers to lower and lower concentrations. And that's where a lot of states are going. And it seems to be adopted or accepted as maybe industry best practice in the absence of national regulations right now.
If you drew data sets and regulations for North Carolina data, mind you that the sample size is not terribly accurate or statistically accurate. You know, you'd be at 22 for 20 for PFOA, 55 for PFOS. We're going to throw numbers out there. We're well below both of those.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit, but really we see this as a risk. We see states adopting this tiered approach. Our monitoring is showing that there are times during the year, and based on how the regulations may come out in Virginia, there are times during the year where we may be restricted in what we can land apply. And with Michigan, we've seen iterations where those, as they address significant industrial users, those tiers are reduced. The Michigan's original tier to prohibit land application was 150. They're down to 100, and as they go through sampling and as they go through addressing their industrial users, they're starting to ramp down. So it's a different regulatory paradigm from what we're typically used to through EPA. So we have an opportunity to leverage this investment of $355 million in our biosolids diversification project to start to put us in a good place to be able to figure out what we're going to do with our biosolids if we're restricted or severely restricted in our ability to land apply. Mr. Pylong spoke about our biosolids diversification project earlier. It has a number of very complementary goals. Initially, we had started this project to repair and replace equipment, aging infrastructure that needed upgrades. And these medium-term projects that we're looking at are really looking to set us up for this potential regulatory future. The goals of that medium-term project are to reduce the volume of AlexRenew's biosolids to make it easier, less for us to handle. Potentially diversify the end uses so we can pivot away from land application if we need to, support our sustainability goals, build local partnerships, which has always been one of the cores of AlexRenew's infrastructure programs, And again, to adapt to this potential future regulatory requirements. On the right, you can see a thermal drying system for biosolids, what that looks like installed. So as you all know, we are moving towards thermal drying. I have some show and tell for you all.
Like Shark Tank where they hand out.
I know, right? So I thought it would be helpful with this slide for people to get an idea of what we're starting with and what we're planning to end with. So right here, this jar is our dewatered biosolids cake. It's about 75% water. It's what we currently land apply. After the drying project is completed, we will be producing biosolids pellets that are about 5% water. Going from cake to pellets, even though I should have filled that one up and then filled this one. I should have put more.
In hindsight.
In hindsight, dealing with cake in a small spoon and trying not to get it all over your desk is a challenge. I do not recommend it. But going from cake to dried pellets is going to reduce the volume of our biosolids produced by 60%. It also sets us up for some really potentially beneficial end uses. We can still land apply. Our cake right now is considered Class B cake. The pellets are considered Class A biosolids. They can be used to do a lot more like blending, etc. But we have other avenues now open to us. We can use them for waste to energy. As you dry biosolids, the embedded energy increases because you're taking out that water. We're also set up for a potential regional facility. If we're to partner, we have a lot of other partners who do drying, and it just helps having a similar feedstock for regional facilities. And then there are emerging technologies that Mr. Winchell is going to discuss that need dried biosolids pellets. So we will potentially have more end uses and more beneficial end uses at the end of this project. So Mr. Winchell is coming up next. He's going to talk about some research that we've been doing to help set us up for these other potentials.
Before you go, we've been talking a lot about biosolids and potential regulations regarding the application of biosolids. You foresee regulations regarding our effluent, our liquid effluent?
There's a question for you.
So
Maybe start with the permit cycle. We're going through a permit renewal. What are some of the comments we're seeing on permit renewal?
sure, starting at the national level, EPA is doing the aquatic life and human health analysis to see if to set water quality standards that could be included in, accepted by states and included in permits. That work isn't done yet. But what we're seeing, particularly from aquatic life, is that those levels are very high. And so we don't think that those are as much of a risk as our biosolids, as for biosolids. However, to Mr. Carl's point, we are seeing local residents and environmental groups submit comments and want to have public hearings on every new water permit that is issued in the Commonwealth. And so we are going through a permit renewal right now. We submitted our application back in June. We expect to have a draft permit in May. And we're expecting to get comments and have a public hearing. And most of the comments are around monitoring and sampling for PFAS, and including that in new. Arlington just had their public meeting last Thursday, and it was pretty well attended, and there was a lot of discussion to that effect.
There's been a lobby for DEQ to include, and they won't without national standard, but an end of pipe effluent limit. And how do you get rid of it in the effluent of the plant? Activated carbon, we put the carbon columns back in.
Yeah.
There you go, Bill. More spending. Well, that's how we'd have to get rid of it. If that were to happen, the solution is carbon. Carbon when it's expended. Farnums. Comes char,
Yeah,
or regenerate.
or regenerate it and you have an industry that has,
I don't think we're there yet. There's comments coming out. I think for the board to have an understanding that we are going through a permit renewal. Arlington, which just happened last Wednesday, is our future.
I think it's to our benefit that the board has been supporting quarterly sampling and we have data that we're happily sharing publicly. And I think that puts us in good light that we're being proactive.
More to come.
More to come.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk with you all. It's a little warmer here than back home, so it's from Minnesota right now, but start off here. This is similar to the chart that you saw earlier, kind of a big graph with the arrows around. It's representative mainly of the same information that was previously presented. You have a PFAS origination point, and then it gets out into our world, cycles around a lot. And this was part of some of our initial research that we published before we got into sampling different systems. And the thing I wanted to point out here, two things I wanted to point out is this graphic is built on all these arrows. You can go through the scientific literature and find publications that support that there is PFAS in all of these various avenues. And the PFAS is mobile in the gas phase, atmosphere, whatever, flue gas from thermal processes through liquid phase, which is what we're more familiar with in this industry, wastewater. And then in the solid phase, we're talking about biosolids tonight, but you can think of municipal solid waste as well. And this all kind of drives into the center box here of thermal treatment. If you are so compelled to treat for PFAS in a way that you can get some destruction at a minimum, thermal treatment right now is the only commercially available option for you. So in our world, there are various thermal technologies that you can consider. You're so compelled to do so for PFAS treatment. Historically, the main thermal technology or high temperature thermal technology in our business is incineration. And so this is combustion, the combustion. I think the first incineration facility was installed in Michigan in 1935. So we've been doing it for about 90 years. Incineration is complicated. It's not easy, but we've been doing it long enough. There is a support community out there and we can make it reliable. And it has the benefit of, in rough numbers, it's reducing that dewatered cake that you have a jar of floating around by about 95%. That's the amount of ash that's left after you were to combust that. So incineration is our proven thermal technology. There are other technologies emerging. Pyrolysis and gasification have been getting a lot of buzz in the last few years. We've been trying to make those technologies work in our field for as long as I've been alive. They're difficult in their own right. And we've published a second paper or a different paper. That's where this graphic comes from. And it was my way of showing you if you were looking at incineration process or gasification and you thought you were getting something simpler with either a pyrolysis or gasification system, you would be wrong. They're roughly the same in that this graphic can depict any of those three with the furnace here in the middle. And then off of that furnace, you would have a high temperature flue gas. It's anywhere from 1600 to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Generally, you're going to recover some energy or heat off of that flue gas and recycle it through the process and or produce some power. After that, that flue gas, we all want to breathe clean air. So you're going to add some air pollution control equipment on the back end. So that's all common to all three of those technologies: incineration, pyrolysis, gasification. Where they can differ is upstream, that pellet that you all have floating around. Pyrolysis and gasification, they need that very stable, relatively dry material. Incineration can handle that water content in that cake for the most part. There are incinerators and there are certain applications where you can dry upstream of the incinerator, but for pyrolysis and gasification, that dryer is needed. And drying in itself is a very complicated process, as we're all gonna learn here, but it has a tremendous upside too. So with pyrolysis and gasification, as I mentioned, they have a long history of trying to get into the industry. The latest generation, there's about 5 demonstration units across the country. Just rough numbers, demonstration unit, they might process like a truckload of material a day. It's just kind of a more of a technology proving application. They haven't been proven reliable at scale. For example, your facility, and reliable. In comparison, incinerators, we would typically run in one for about 48 weeks out of the year, and then you have about 4 weeks of downtime for maintenance. For the pyrolysis gasification, again, they're trying to get there. They're not there yet. There are tremendous upsides to pyrolysis gasification if we can overcome those logistical hurdles, technological hurdles. But just want you all to be aware, eyes wide open, that none are proven to date. And then there are some other emerging technologies as well. I'm not going to list them there, but you can just, on my analogy, these were, they have applications where they're treating like a bucket of material a day just to try and test out the technology. So these are the suite of thermal processes that you would all have available to you if you were looking to try and treat for PFAS or for other reasons. So I didn't list drying in that list because it's not necessarily degrading the organic material. It's just removing the water. But we have studied Beta PFAS through a full-scale dryer system out in California. It was a collaboration with Synagro, which I understand handles your biosolids right now for land applications, so you're well aware of what they do. But they have a dryer out there that we took some samples of. This is, I apologize, a complicated diagram, but it gets to the point that these processes have a lot on in it. So as part of our FATE research projects, we're trying to measure all the major inputs and outputs to these processes. And so I've got the inputs highlighted in yellow, and then the outlets in green. There's a few intermediate points that we sampled within this system. But just some major takeaways, that you watered cake, that you have one jar as it goes to process through that dryer to become that pellet that you have in the other jar. In our study, we lost a little over 40% of PFAS from that major from that solid phase. It went somewhere. We couldn't exactly measure where, but we did also measure the off gas from this dryer process. You can imagine you're evaporating a lot of water from the process, creating a gas stream, but there is also other gases evolving, and then also you're adding a lot of hot air to this dryer in particular to dry the biosolids. And so there's potentially some transition of the PFAS from the solids phase into that gas phase. And so we measured that. And this number here, that less than 0.01% is not the other 50% of the PFAS that we were looking for in the water cake that got lost from the solid phase through the dryer. So there's a lot to be learned about where the PFAS is going, and or is it being transformed into something we can't measure. But the other point with this study is, in at the scale you're looking at, we're probably going to be thermally treating that off gas in the dryer. So in this case, we had a thermal oxidizer or an RTO that's cooking that off gas at a certain temperature and for a certain amount of time. And we saw that through that thermal oxidizer, there was about a 99.3% reduction of PFAS ultimately leading to a fairly clean exhaust to the atmosphere. So I threw a lot at you on that one. That's probably a 30-minute discussion in itself, but if you, any questions? The glass is half full is your biosolids are going to be less contaminated with PFAS after you dry. All right, so how I got involved with you all on this project is my incineration background and the work I've done researching PFAS through that process. So we teamed up to take some of your water cake and send it to University of Dayton Research Institute, that's Dayton, Ohio. They were the forebears of PFAS thermal research. 3M paid them back in, I think it was about 2000 to burn some PFOS and see what happened because 3M knew there was some liability coming on that front. So they built us a reactor. It's in this picture here, the second picture from the left, that mimics the best we can at this scale, the real-world incineration facility just down the road. And we took your cake, we spiked it with PFAS, so it would be easier to measure how well the system performed at treating that PFAS, and we spiked it with PFOS and PFOA. So the two compounds we've been talking about tonight. And then this is the furnace here. You can see it's kind of glowing orange there. This is just a close-up of that orange area. Biosolids are in this, call it a boat. It's just a tray. And slide this glass tube. And then we rotate this screw at a predetermined rate, push that tray in to the furnace. And inside that furnace, it's about 1,000 degrees Celsius. It's about 1,850 degrees Fahrenheit. And we designed it so when the material combusts and off gas, that gas is inside that tube for about a second. That's roughly mimicking the real-world furnace. And then the solid material is in there for about 2 hours. So I'm indirectly implying that temperature matters, but the amount of time that material is at that temperature really matters as well. So whenever you're considering PFAS treatment, just remember it's time and temperature and turbulence. So 3 T's of combustion efficiency. But anyways, we do that. We take some samples of that material after that spike material, so we know how much PFAS we're putting in there, and then we're measuring the ash for PFAS afterwards, and also that gas that's being emitted. And you just think of it like a campfire in the smoke rising from it. You're not going to see any smoke from this because it's so hot, but it's the same concept. We're sampling that gas as well using the EPA methods. OTM 45, that's sampling for PFAS. OTM 50, that is sampling for things that PFAS are likely to break down into if it's not a completely efficient combustion reaction. And so I think before I leave this slide, we have conducted this experiment. I've got the report in my hands. The preliminary numbers are anywhere from 99.92% destruction and removal of PFAS all the way up to 99.99999 or 6 nines of treatment. We did pre-runs, so that's the range we saw. So mentioned we were mimicking the real-world incineration facility because we all like considering sending out there for home incineration. If you were to do that, you're not the first to do that. There, in my experience, there's been 4, and there are currently still 2 running. Here is the H-Power facility out in Honolulu. They take, I think the county of Honolulu has, I think it was like 4 or 5 plants that they're sending biosolids to this facility on an intermittent basis. It's not the entire load, but they send part of their load to this facility. It is operated by ReWorld, the other facility that is also incinerating in the US is similarly operated by ReWorld. In the case of Honolulu or H-Power, they send about 20,000 tons of biosolids to this facility. After they burn it, and that hot off gas I mentioned, there's an opportunity to recover some energy there and potentially produce power. They're generating enough power from those biosolids to power about 1,500 homes on the island.
While we're on this slide, the combustion of the biosolids, that is what's generating the heat to do the conversion?
So they're considering municipal solid waste, trash with biosolids in it. But when you calculate the BTU value of the biosolids that are released from the combustion process, that's enough to drive power 1,500.
So is the BTU of the biosolids greater or less than what municipal solid waste would be?
So we were talking earlier about we have a hard time with consistency or variability in water and biosolids quality in municipal solid waste. It's definitely worse. I don't have that number committed to memory, but a dried biosolids, and I think your digested dried biosolids have the same BTU value content similar to a dry piece of maple. So it burns pretty well.
We were at 6,500 BTUs when we did our testing. When we talked to ReWorld, we were slightly higher than what they're seeing with their municipal solid waste, to the point where they wanted to be, I guess, dosed or injected or blended with their waste to keep it consistent to keep the BTU value consistent in the incinerator.
Keep the boilers at the same temperature,
Something like
so I can drive.
it seemed like from their experience, we were a little bit higher, but not by thousands or anything like that, slightly higher.
It's not a disadvantage for them to take. It's actually an advantage to some degree, potentially.
It should be.
Yeah.
The issues I've seen are in the handling process, physically receiving the material and then getting it into the furnace. That can cause some heartache.
Yeah, for wet biosolids,
Either way, right, or
that's it. ReWorld wouldn't take that. Told us know that for a long time. Correct.
We need to do a site visit. I'm available, just in case.
But besides, how we can, take about an hour.
No, that's fine. This is, it's not comparable, yeah. We have to see this one.
Yeah, the technology here, I think, is.
I think, yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
interested in. I can tell.
The injection is, actually what interested us, because when we talked to ReWorld, the challenge initially was watching how they unload and load trash into the incinerator. It's, it could see our dried pellet as being a challenge by dropping to the bottom of that solid waste stream and not getting lifted up into the rest of it mixed well. That's the biggest concern for our coordination right now, is how to keep it well mixed within the solid waste.
Just have to make cubes out of it, so the crane and the way that pick up how many
Right.
cubes do we
Yeah.
want to put in the incinerator per hour?
You mentioned that we wouldn't be the first, that there's 4 facilities and 2 are currently running. What happened to the other 2? Is there reasons why they're not currently running anymore?
I don't know. I pulled those other 2. There's in my world, there's like 2 or 3 textbooks that talk about what I do. And they were listed in there. And I think the one I pulled it from was from the 90s. But Huntsville, Alabama is the other one that's currently running.
Chemistry question. What is the PFAS and PFAS breaking into when exposed to this 1,800 degree heat? Just various fluoride substances, is that what it is?
So if the combustion reaction is complete, which you have a chemistry background, no reaction is 100% efficient, but the thermodynamic endpoints of PFAS destruction is CO2, so that takes care of the carbon, water, any hydrogen is attached to become water. Fluoride would become hydrogen fluoride, HF. Very strong acid, but all these systems come with a scrubbing system on the back end to take care of it. And because we're talking about, you're not a hazardous waste facility where you're treating concentrated PFAS, that hydrogen fluoride acid isn't going to bother the system.
As gas, it's leaving as gas.
Yeah. And just to put the dry biosolids fuel value in perspective. So these processes, these full-scale incinerators, they receive their material, it's got very good quality across the day. They'll use like a natural gas or diesel to trim that to make the boiler run steadily. You can use dried biosolids to do the same. Get that done. Right, so I talked about PFAS, but there are other aspects you want to consider with this. Talking about greenhouse gas?
So I think as we've been considering this partnership with ReWorld, we've been doing research on PFAS, but also been doing analyses on other potential environmental benefits, as Mr. Winchell spoke about. One of the big benefits is not having to load 2 trucks a day with biosolids and have them travel an average of 90 miles outside of the city. If we're able to find a local solution, a local source to take our dry biosolids pellets, that alone would reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from trucking about 98%. Less trucks, more local, which is equivalent to taking 50 cars road permanently. Pretty significant reduction. And then finally, as Mr. Winchell spoke about, incinerators commonly have energy recovery systems. The one operated by ReWorld here also recovers energy. With our dried biosolids product, our research has shown that it has more than 6,000 BTU per pound. And on an annual basis, if we use that for energy production, that would power about 2,800 houses for 1 year. So also significant energy generation benefit. With
My
that,
recollection's correct, that's about 15% of the waste energy facility's current production. I think there are about 20,000 homes is what their facility now powers through the.
yes,
They basically run electric generators. They're the most northern electric producer in Dominion's grid.
Where are they located?
Eisenhower Avenue, you know where the UPS facility is?
Oh, you mean Covanta?
Yeah, it used to be Cadanta. Company changed its name to One World. ReWorld or whatever.
Stop off there.
No, I know exactly where. I always knew that as Covanta. I didn't.
They changed their name.
they recently changed their name to ReWorld.
We still call
By the way, great presentation.
I got a question, follow up on what Mr. Hill asked. The PFAS for its incinerator, you said it changes carbon dioxide, water and hydrogen, and fluorine. Where does the fluorine go?
Hydrofluoric gas.
Is that a gas? Is it?
So
And
it's,
what's the concentration of that?
so it depends on how much organic chlorine you're adding to the system for, I don't know that I'd run the calc on what the concentration would be in a typical municipal biosolids incinerator. But I mentioned that hydrogen fluoride gas gets caught in a scrubbing system. typically that scrubbing system would be a wet scrubbing system. So it's getting dissolved in water. So it becomes a chloride ion. Acid ion. And then where does Reworld send their scrubber blow down? I know you get boiler blow down.
We get boiler blow down. We don't get those,
So they might have a dry scrubbing system there. When we site a sewage sludge incinerator at a wastewater treatment plant, water's essentially free. We just use plant effluent to run that scrubber, so they don't have to pay for it. But the industry separated from the water source, they get the dry system, so they'd be blowing in like a line.
I think that's what, I think it's a dry system.
Yeah, so it'd be calcium chloride.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Moving right along to the almost final item on the agenda.
Really quick, that same presentation we just went through will be presented at the Environmental Policy Commission meeting on February 20th. For the January.
January 26th.
January.
January 20th.
On Monday.
next week, yeah, next
26th.
Monday.
I'll be at that too.
Oh, will you, Mr. Hill? I'm sorry, you'll have to hear it again.
Do that
No, you
again.
want it,
No, by the way, I think you should do this.
yeah, because we're gonna have to put
Okay.
a note,
It's not
right?
gonna
Yeah.
Question on going back to Reworld. What's Arlington's, but since they own that plant along with Alexandria 50/50, what are their plans in regards to biosolids, or what is their thinking at this point?
So the discussion right now to this point has been to accept the biosolids, that they'd have to increase their throughput capacity. So they would need to get permission from the city to increase it by, what was it,
3%
3%? Is that right, Aaron?
for biosolids from AlexRenew. So that was for rerolled permit.
Coordination we would need to do in conjunction with the city council.
So that's an increase in their permit?
No, it's within their permit. Our understanding is within the permit. It's just the throughput. They're not currently at their permit capacity for throughput.
Yeah, that's
It would
been an
hit-
issue for a while.
That's the coordination point we have to.
So there is capacity in the plant. It's a question that the city would approve it.
Correct. Correct. I think the initial ask from the city was to show the environmental benefit when Mr. Scriback was still here. With the city, that's something we prepared, what we presented tonight quite some time ago. First time we put it into a presentation to present it publicly.
Moving right along to the monthly report.
So I'm gonna make this quick because we've had a long meeting already. I'll have to turn it over directly, unless there's any questions in the first few pages of the monthly report.
Nope.
Good. Turn it directly over to First Mid Waters to go through again, the current version is in your green folder. Go through the general assembly section, and right after that, the mouse talk again. It's Dr. Goulet is going to get up to the podium and walk through our but our mid-year budget review.
To pages 4 and 5 of the monthly report. The assembly session update. Mr. Carl said the session kicked off last Wednesday, and as Aaron knows as well as I do, it's been very active. We're tracking about 50 bills. About a third of those have some impact on AlexRenew. It might be very minor. But I'm just going to go through a few that are our highest priorities. So starting with, and by the way, the end of this week is the deadline for filing bills. Goodness. I'm going to start at the bottom, looking up at going after the source. There are 2 bills in the House that would ban cosmetics that intentionally add PFAS and other contaminants to products. Those we don't know what chance those will have of moving through, but it's nice to see that there is some attention to actually controlling at the source. If you go up to the House Bill Clark, that is something that would require us to make some modifications to our pre-treatment program with self-reporting for industries that use PFAS in their processes. There's no regulatory teeth there other than just monitoring. McPike's bill passed last year and was vetoed by the governor. Pretty much the same this year. This would require PFAS monitoring for certain defined industrial users. Then we have House Bill from Loeffner. This one would be at the locality level that would allow localities to test biosolids that were going to be land applied. It uses water quality standards, which doesn't make any sense, but
So when the truck pulls up to the farm, it's like somebody's gonna dip it, go, nah, take it back. Right?
yeah. Okay, and then we've got House Bill 880. This one would require monthly PFAS sampling, testing of sewage sludge. This one, where's the location of this one? Let's see here. So this one would be sampling at the sewage treatment plant for PFAS, and that there's no limits on this one. It's just sampling bill. And then the most significant one that has been filed is Senator Stewart's bill, which would prohibit land application if there's any trace of PFAS, and would require that there be certifications given to any land where you apply, certifying that there aren't trace amounts of PFAS, and there's civil penalties that apply if you violate that. So we thus far have not seen the bill that we have been working on, which would have an interim limit. We don't know what that would be, but it would not be trace. And so what we are hearing is that that'll be introduced this week, and all the biosolids related PFAS bills will be consolidated, and it'll go to committee when we start working through the details and hopefully land somewhere where we will not be facing an effective ban as of July or when this bill is effective. Any questions on PFAS?
Is Stewart serious about his bill? Is he posturing? Knowing his behavior in the past.
Senator Stewart seems to be thinking of, let's say, a marker bill to show how serious he is to his local farmers and watermen, but doesn't expect it to have like.
Like the bill he put in requiring a certain jurisdiction, Northern Virginia, to deal with the CSO within a deadline.
He's very happy when he came here.
Yep.
And saw it on the 8th.
So maybe use some of that goodwill.
We tried.
So are we taking a public position on any of these?
We have not yet. Well, I want to say something.
So the city is taking some positions on the bills. These come to us too, and we're required to either support, oppose, watch, or we say if there's no impact. So with respect to, the sampling, obviously data is good. We support sampling. With respect to Senator Stewart's bill, we put in our comments that we oppose that bill because it is essentially a ban. It does not allow for wastewater treatment facilities to find other means of dealing with biosolids. There is limited landfill capacity, all the stuff Allison already talked about. So staff is recommending that opposition to it.
I think, Ms. Hammer, we work through 2 agencies in the state for bills. One of those is VAMLA. And then the other one is the WWAA. And we'll support bills or oppose bills through them. But from our standpoint, we were supportive of McPike bill last year. There was a conflict within VAMLA last year of supporting that bill, but that's something they'd likely support this year as well. I think when we see what bill gets introduced from the joint municipalities and authorities with respect to PFAS, and we know what the limit is, we'll be able to work with those agencies to support that bill and likely go down and talk during the committee sessions if we're asked to progress that. Hopefully will become the only PFAS bill for biosolids.
What we intend to do is probably update the board's talking points once we get that legislation. AlexRenew position that will likely be the same as Amla's position.
We know what the administration, what DEQ's position.
They interviewed, you mean the director?
Or just their,
Director, who's ever, temporarily or in charge.
Right, it's still the same director as before. I think they interviewed 2 weeks ago. And it could be anywhere between weeks and months until they appoint a new director or they keep Rollband in there. We're not sure what yet is gonna happen, but they definitely did hold interviews 2 weeks ago. I think Director Rollband, understands the needs for PFAS legislation, so we have a good relationship with him from a PFAS standpoint.
and I think we would like to have more data across the state to see levels that were typically seen in fluid effluent and biosolids.
The bill that we worked on jointly, it was, our initial bill didn't have a limit. There was a push to have a limit. There was talk about that limit to be something like 100. And then the patron got a new job as the Secretary of Resources. So we have a new patron for the bill that is holding that bill very close to their chest right now. So we don't know now what that limit will be, 20, 50, something like that. It's the best we know. Match Maryland, those are the three. It's not 100. 2050 Match Maryland is where we think we're at. But remember, there's like 8 different groups working on that same bill. Chesapeake Bay, FAMWA, Riverkeeper, Virginia Wild, they're all working on that same bill with that same people.
Moving over to procurement, the 2 bills, or the bill that we expected to come back that passed last session was vetoed by the governor on the apprenticeship requirements for capital projects back in 2 forms, 2 House bills. One requires 8% total labor hours performed by apprentices. The other 15% provides some off ramps that really do not work at all. They would require us to, as the owner, to certify in advance that the contractor cannot meet the apprenticeship requirements. We wouldn't know that. So problematic, and we will be opposing this legislation as written. Then we have 3 bills. These do not directly impact us. These only affect SCC, State Corporation Commission utilities, but we track these because they often will come around to us the following year, or we may want to mirror anything that Virginia American Water is required to do. The first would require discounted rates for customers that meet certain income eligibility. And the second one would ban rate increases more frequently than once every 3 years. I believe that's directed at Virginia American Water. And then the final one says no utility, SCC utility, can charge a disconnection fee or reconnection fee to restore service that was disconnected for non-payment. So there's a number of FOIA bills, and there's some wages, labor bills that we're tracking that don't that will have a minimal impact. The ones that we just went over, the big one.
If you remember last year, the affordability tariff that Virginia American Water tried to get through the SEC, it didn't pass. We think that Herring's bill, which is our local representative, we think that Herring's bill is meant to get that, gives the ability for an SEC regulated utility to give an 80% reduction. I'm sorry, to give a reduction on a rate if you're at 80% AMI. So we're tracking that because of the interest the board had a few years ago regarding the same type of legislation in the Virginia Water and Waste Authority Act. So how hard is that to be translated over and just give us the ability to do it? That's why we're tracking that.
Yeah, right.
Here's some good news, like, okay, all right. Oh, and one other thing, I do want to thank the city, their new legislative director, Ms. Ginsburg and Ms. Bevis Carver for working with us. I think from a General Assembly standpoint, this is the most coordinated action in the city I've been here. So I think it's been really good to be able to bounce bills off each other. And there will likely come a point to the board, so you understand that we'll have to work through the city to make sure council's briefed on whatever PFAS bill does end up coming out. And we'll support them with partnerships and vice versa. And let the city know what our position or our association's positions will be on those bills. Sorry.
You good? Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We talking about the financial conditions of AlexRenew for FY 26 through December, from July 2025 to December 2025. The same information I'll be talking about can be found on your the monthly CEO report, pages 5 through 7. Overall, the financial conditions of AlexRenew through December continue to look very good and strong, both from a compliance standpoint as well as a spending compared to budget standpoint. First, from a financial compliance standpoint, is we have the two of our main targets, I should say, which is the debt coverage ratio. That's pretty much AlexRenew's ability to generate cash to pay its obligated debt. Through December, we are at 2.1 times on with a financial target of 1.6. So we are ahead of our target right there. Another compliance target is the days cash on hand, which is cash reserve. Again, that's AlexRenew's current cash as it stands as of today. Even if we were not to get any more cash going forward, is the ability to pay our operating expenses for the for the near term. And on that target, on that measure alone, we are 823 days on a minimum target on our policy of 270 days. So both our debt service coverage ratio as well as our cash reserves are looking really strong through December 2025. Talking about spending compared to budget and revenue compared to budget as well, wastewater revenue through December slightly above budget, approximately 2%, while Fairfax operating expense revenue is flat to budget. Sorry. Sorry. I got something in my throat. I'm trying to call out. Sorry about it.
Joe's up about the budget.
Got his heart in the right place, you know?
Debt proceeds, Fairfax contribution, as well as capital spending through mid-year remains below budget, primarily due to lower capital execution and capital spending. Operating expenses through mid-year is slightly below budget, about 5% below budget through mid-year. Major highlights of FY 26 so far, as you all know, with AlexRenew being funded through the WIFIA program, one of our funding sources. So on the WIFIA loan, we've drawn about $20.8 million through December just in FY 2026. Same thing goes with our Phase Forward project that we are funding through the green bond. So far in FY 26 on the Phase Forward project that Mr. Pylon spoke about earlier, we've drawn approximately 4.6 million, again, just in FY 2026 so far, mid-year. One of the highlights is what we've talked about in the previous meetings, that AlexRenew received a modified clean opinion on its FY 2025 financial audit, as well as single audit for 2025. And that wraps up and concludes the financial update so far. Any questions so far?
Why the capital spending is lower? Is it scheduled or is it invoices are not coming in on time?
You said why are expenses lower?
Capital spending.
Capital spending, lower. As Mr. Pollan alluded to earlier, when he was talking about some capital expenses, so in our budget, for one, we had some higher estimates. Also, the timing of when the project actually started, so far hasn't been in line as we planned.
You're gonna tell me scheduling. All right, yeah.
One way or another.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good news.
Doom and gloom over here.
So a fairly typical report this month, since it was December last month, period we're reporting on holidays, and we had colder weather, so that did affect our ability to disconnect during that period. That said, we still saw a decrease in about 23 accounts month over month and $12,000. So overall, a good month considering we had limited disconnections. We only had about 8 accounts receive leap last month, but those were all sort of reactionary to the disconnection process. One thing I wanted to share that is a good takeaway for the month is in May 2024, our median delinquent amount for residential customers was $367, which you might remember is sort of what we based our leap disbursement on initially. It was that $350 mark. And today it's about $155. That's the median. We could look at the average, but again, we have quite a few outliers that sort of skew those numbers. So that 155 is a pretty good number. Jumping over to the LEAP dashboard. Again, we only assisted 8 customers this month, which is relatively low from what we've seen the last few months, but partially due to the inability to disconnect. We've still got $200,000 remaining in our account, which is great for when we're shifting to assist multifamily customers.
I do. Could we just talk about the 30 disconnections in December?
Sure.
Okay, so 30 disconnections, but 11 paid in full, 10 went on a payment plan, 8 applied for LEAP. If I was one of those 30, what am I going through? I mean, is my water really cut off or is it threatened to be cut off?
If you end up in the list of disconnecting customers, your water is disconnected.
Was disconnected.
But leading up to that, you've received.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, okay.
I know all about that.
Yeah, and then you also have people buying door hanger.
No, I
disconnected.
fully-
It offers.
fully aware.
Okay, yeah, I'm setting it up. That's good.
No, I got it, but 10 of these folks paid in full.
Uh-huh.
So how long was their water off?
Usually they are able to turn it on the same day.
So it's literally turned off and then turned on the
Yeah.
same day.
Yeah.
Same with the payment plan folks and same with the LEAP folks.
Yeah, if you call and you either have a lead disbursement that covers your bill, or you can cover the remainder, or you're on a payment plan, then your return to service the same day. Typically, it depends what time they call on.
And Virginia American is turning off their water essentially at their house, right? Right in front of their house.
That's correct. Now, Virginia American Water, if you remember, also is installing advanced meters too. So in theory, yeah, in the future, they can't do that right now.
Okay. So the run up for one of these individuals is they're getting all these notices, they're getting phone calls, they're getting door hangers, all this stuff. I know all about it.
Yeah.
That's the point. Virginia American turns their water off. They pay in full. Water comes back on the same day.
Mm-hmm. Virginia American Water will guarantee they'll turn it in 24 hours, I believe, but usually it's the same day.
Amazing.
They typically do them early in the morning, and that way somebody's aware that their water's off. Yeah, that's time to turn it back.
So you get up in the morning, get your coffee. And you're like, whoops.
I have a data question.
Sure.
So if my water shut off, let's say I owe $1,500. I apply LEAP, I get $1,000 from LEAP and like I cover the remaining 500. Is that counted as paid in full or received LEAP? Because it seems like it should be both, but I noticed in the data that that's never double counted.
Yeah, so it can overlap, but yeah, typically. Well, it depends. Oftentimes, if somebody gets $1,000, they'll get our payment plan for them.
Right. So that's just not common. That just doesn't happen.
It,
Okay.
it could happen.
Okay.
Have you personally talked to some of these individuals, where we've disconnected? Or is that more Hans is doing that?
It's more Hans. I have talked to several of them now.
I'm just fascinated how
One
you
came in
get to the
today,
point,
yeah.
you get to the point where your water is disconnected and then you pay it full. It's interesting.
Do you have a question there?
No, I'm just.
Procrastination.
You just forget about paying your bill.
Procrastination or trying.
Pretty easy.
As
Yeah,
long
and
as you
it-
can.
Yeah.
I think this is typical of most utilities, right? But you have a limited amount of resources to disconnect. And oftentimes there's more folks on the list than you do. And a given month or a given year, and it's a gamble. If you're bluffing.
I always like to put myself in the position of a customer.
Yeah.
And then what are they seeing? What are they experiencing? What are they thinking? So, thank you. Very, very, very illuminating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just two quick updates on the two dashboards because staff spent time putting this together. On the back of the phase 4 dashboard, you can see what feels like was vacated yesterday. The new construction trailer complex going in being the South Main Street, tucked up against I-45. Much like the trailer complex across the street, that will become the phase 4 trailer complex. Next 7 years. So that's the old site that we used before, for the early river project. So there'll be it'll look like this, but not as a little more janky. And then back in the Riverview dashboard, this is in the monthly Federation update, Mr. Hill, but you can see the facade going on to the back of the building. You know, seeing this rendered for the last 7 years versus what it's coming out to be. You know, that I drove in this morning looking up the building, you know, if the sky is gray enough, it does disappear into the sky when those dots kind of get closer to the facade of the building. Down at the bottom, you get that really full shadow look with the architectural detail of the protruding brick. So, you know, Riverview, while exciting that it's coming online, updates are really going to be around the pumping station from here on out, getting commissioned and getting this thing looking pretty. The building is at its constructed height. So we had the topping off celebration of the building being topped off. All we finished work below grade.
It's a beautiful building.
It is, you know, there is a worry that there will be some like moss and like just staining around that. That's just in my head still.
Things to worry about.
Figure that out later.
Things to
How to
worry
pressure
about.
wash that.
Anything else? Any other business? Motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, staff. Great presentation.
It's funny on that waste energy.
Yeah, that was just terrible. So, you need to still.